Picture this, Arizona, 2008. The sun is shining, and you have Travis Alexander, this like young motivational speaker living the dream. He's got a successful career. He's inspiring people, telling them about how he overcame a tough childhood, friends, ambition, a bright future, the whole 9 yards. But then it's all ripped away. Travis is found murdered in his own home, and it's brutal.
It's one of those cases that just grabs you right away, That contrast, a life full of promise, just gone in such a violent way. It really makes you wonder, like, what could possibly lead to something so awful?
Yeah, absolutely. And as the investigation starts, they focused on someone who was really close to Travis, Jodi Arias, his ex-girlfriend. So now it's not just a story about success, it's about obsession, jealousy, and ultimately murder. Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series, where we dig into these really complicated cases and try to understand what seems impossible to understand.
And today, we're taking a deep dive into the Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias case. We'll look at the facts, the evidence, and try to understand the psychology behind it all. A case that, really captivated the whole country.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Who were Travis and Jodi before all of this, before their paths crossed and led to this tragedy?
All right, so Travis's story before Jodi is kind of like a classic story of resilience. He was born in 77, and he had a rough childhood, but he turned it all around. He became the successful motivational speaker, businessman, and he was really involved in the Mormon community, known for being charismatic and ambitious. He seemed to genuinely want to help other people.
So he sounds like almost like a symbol of positivity. Then Jodi Arias comes into the picture. She was born in 1980. What can you tell us about her?
Well, Jodi was a photographer, so she was drawn to a more artistic, expressive kind of life. Smart, definitely, and people described her as passionate, but also someone who could be emotionally volatile. Even early on, you see these differences, different personalities, different ways of looking at life, different backgrounds.
Kind of makes you think, right? Were those differences part of what drew them together, or were they always going to, clash?
That's the big question, right? Attraction is powerful, but those differences, sometimes the things that attract you at first, they become problems later on. And you have to remember, Travis was really devoted to his Mormon faith, so that created a kind of unusual context for their relationship, right? Jodi actually converted to Mormonism while they were together, but, whether that was real or something else, well, that was debated a lot throughout the case.
So maybe a little of both, right? A
Yeah.
spark, but also maybe some, built-in potential for conflict. But even with those differences, they started a relationship. Was it like a whirlwind romance right from the start?
Yeah. Whirlwind is probably the right word. It was intense, on again, off again, full of passion, but also a lot of breakups and getting back together. Even Travis, with all his confidence, he had doubts about whether Jodi was the right person for him in the long run. But that intensity, it kept pulling them back together.
It sounds like that push and pull you see in a lot of relationships that are really up and down. But at what point does that passion become something, darker, something dangerous?
That's when those red flags start to show up, right? Those cracks in the image of this passionate romance. Travis's friends, they started describing Jodi's behavior as increasingly erratic. There were accusations of stalking, slashing his tires, even hacking into his accounts.
Wow, that's a lot. Seems like the warning signs were definitely there.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that in the trial, a lot of those accusations were questioned, trying to figure out what was true amidst all the drama of the courtroom. That was hard. But even if some of it was exaggerated or maybe came from anger after the breakup, it still shows us a picture of a relationship that was in trouble long before June of 2008.
June 4th, 2008. That's the day Travis Alexander's life was cut short. Can you take us back to that day? What did investigators find?
It wasn't a simple murder. It was violent. Travis was found in his home in Mesa, Arizona. 27 stab wounds, a gunshot to the head, his throat slashed. It went way beyond just killing someone. It felt personal, fueled by rage, a need to really inflict pain.
It's hard to even imagine that level of anger and violence. And you mentioned before that they found a camera at the scene. What role did that play in everything?
That camera, they found it in Travis's washing machine. And it became a key piece of the puzzle, really. It had all these pictures on it, and some of them were chilling. They showed Jodi and Travis together on the day of the murder, even a picture of Travis alive in the shower.
Just thinking about those pictures, those everyday moments right next to the violence that came after, it's just disturbing.
Yeah, it adds this layer of, creepiness, for sure.
Yeah.
But the camera also caught something else, something totally unplanned. Pictures of the crime scene, the aftermath, all the blood. It seems like the camera malfunctioned, took pictures without anyone wanting it to.
accidental photos. So the crime scene was like documented by chance. That's incredible and really unsettling at the same time.
Exactly. It added a whole new layer to the investigation. It was like a glimpse into those moments right after the murder.
Okay, so you have this gruesome crime scene, the camera, this history of their like volatile relationship.
Yeah.
Where's Jodi in all of this?
Hmm.
Does she become the main suspect right away?
She does, yeah, and pretty quickly. But the more investigators dig, the more they find themselves caught in these lies, these changing stories. It's like Jodi's trying to outsmart everyone, but every time she tries, it seems like she reveals more of the truth.
I have to know more. What was she saying? How did her story change over time?
At first, it was complete denial. She said she hadn't even seen Travis in months, that she had nothing to do with his murder. But then DNA evidence came out, linking her directly to the crime scene. So faced with that, she changed her story completely.
So if she couldn't deny being there, how did she explain being at the crime scene?
Her new story was self-defense. She said Travis attacked her and she had to fight back to protect herself. But, and this is really important, the way she acted during the investigation and later during the trial, it often didn't match this image of a scared victim just trying to survive.
It's like there's this conflict, right? The evidence, her changing stories, how she presented herself through all of it. That must have made things hard for, like, the investigators and the prosecution.
Absolutely. That disconnect between the facts and the way Jodi portrayed herself, it became a huge point of contention as the case went to trial. The whole world was watching, trying to figure out what was real, what was made up, and like how much of it was Jodi trying to manipulate the story.
We're back. And wow, I don't know about you, but I'm still processing everything we've just talked about.
Okay.
Jodi Arias, found guilty of first-degree murder, life in prison. But you said earlier that the story doesn't just, like, end there, right?
No, not at all. This case, it really had this ripple effect way beyond the courtroom. It became this huge media sensation, sparked all these debates, you know. It even felt like it kind of became part of our culture, like a modern day cautionary tale or something.
Yeah, it definitely felt like everyone was watching. And even after the verdict, the media just kept digging, people dissecting every little detail. Why do you think this case resonated so strongly with people?
Well, you know, on the surface, it had everything you'd want in a, like, classic whodunit. The mystery, the lies, the dramatic trial, that always gets people hooked. But I think there's something deeper here. You know, it touched on this, like, really human thing, something unsettling about relationships, the dark side of them. It made people face the fact that love can, like, turn into obsession and passion can lead to violence.
Almost like a warning, right?
Yeah.
Reminding us that the lines between love and control, between passion and danger, they can get blurry sometimes.
Exactly. And I think it also made people rethink domestic abuse and manipulation. We tend to want easy answers, you know,
Yeah.
clear victims, clear villains. But this case, it showed how complicated those dynamics can be, how subtle manipulation can be, how even strong, confident people can get caught in these unhealthy patterns.
It's also a reminder that behind all the headlines, the courtroom drama, there are real people whose lives were shattered by this. you know?
Absolutely. Travis Alexander's family, they became incredibly vocal, advocating for justice, sharing their grief, really working hard to honor his memory, their strength, their resilience after something so awful. It's truly remarkable.
And what about Jodi Arias? Where is she now after the trial?
Still in prison, serving her life sentence. But, and this is interesting, even from prison, she still says she's innocent, filing appeals, giving interviews, always trying to, like, shape how people see the case.
Oh, it's fascinating, really.
Yeah.
Almost like she can't let go of the attention, even after all this.
It's a real puzzle psychologically. Some experts say it's narcissism, you know, needing to be the center of attention no matter what. Others say it could be a way to cope, to deny what she did, and maintain some control in a situation where she has none.
I can see how both of those could be true. It adds another layer to this already, like, captivating story. And we talked about the media before, how they've kept this story alive in everyone's minds.
Oh, yeah. Countless books, documentaries, even a Lifetime movie, all trying to figure out this case, each one with a slightly different angle, a different take. But they all seem to be asking the same basic question. How did it end like this?
It's like we're all trying to put together this puzzle. And maybe some pieces are missing, you know? We want an explanation, a reason, something to hold on to when faced with this kind of senseless tragedy.
That's the power of true crime, right? It makes us confront the darkness that's out there, makes us think about our own ideas about love, trust, how far people can go.
We've talked about the impact on the families, the media, but what about the bigger picture? Did this case change how we think about toxic relationships, domestic violence, all of that?
I think it definitely brought those issues, front and center. People started talking more openly about the warning signs, how important it is to get help if you're in a dangerous situation. Hopefully that raised awareness has led to some positive changes, even if it's just helped one person reach out for help or find the strength to leave a bad relationship.
That's an important point,
Mm.
because in the end, this isn't just a murder story. It's about the choices we make, the consequences, and the responsibility we have to ourselves and each other.
Yeah, you're right. It's about realizing that even the most shocking acts of violence, they often come from a series of choices, patterns of behavior, missed chances to step in and help. The Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias case, as awful as it is, can remind us of that.
It reminds us that these aren't just stories, things we hear for entertainment or to satisfy some curiosity. These are real lives, real consequences, and what happens affects more than just the people directly involved.
Exactly. And while the legal case is over, the impact of this story, it's still unfolding. It stays with us, makes us ask tough questions about ourselves, about our relationships, about the world we live in.
So where do we go from here? How do we deal with all this complexity, the darkness it shows us, without getting lost in all the sensationalism?
I think the key is to approach these stories with both curiosity and empathy. To be fascinated by the psychology, the legal stuff, but also to remember the human cost. To remember that behind all the headlines, the courtroom drama, there are real people who loved, who lost, who are still living with this tragedy.
It's a difficult balance, that's for sure. And it makes me think about how this case affected those of us who followed it so closely, who were so invested in what happened. Is there something about true crime itself that feeds that obsession, that need to understand these really dark parts of human behavior?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll be talking about in the last part of this episode. We'll be looking at the psychology of us, the observers, how this case tapped into our fascination with true crime, and what it says about our own relationship with darkness and tragedy.
Welcome back to CrimePod Castle. We've been going deep, really deep into the Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias case, a story that, it grabbed the whole country's attention, and people are still talking about it today. And like we promised, we're going to dig into that final layer. Us, the people watching, the observers.
Because let's face it, this case didn't just stay in the courtroom, It was on TV, it was online, people were talking about it
Yeah.
everywhere. It became this, cultural phenomenon. You couldn't escape it.
You're so right. It's like the case itself became this obsession for a lot of people.
Hmm.
What is it about these kinds of cases that pulls us in so strongly?
That's a question that's, fascinated psychologists and sociologists for years. I think it's a few things. First, there's that basic human need to understand, When something as shocking and brutal as this murder happens, our brains want to make sense of it. We're looking for a reason, a motive, anything to help us deal with the chaos.
So it's like we're trying to create order out of something that doesn't make sense. Find a pattern in this random tragic event.
Exactly. And true crime stories with their clear narratives, the victim, the perpetrator, the hero, they give us a framework to do that. It's a way to feel like we have some control when the world can feel so unpredictable and dangerous.
But it's more than just needing to understand, right? There's also this element of fascination, even entertainment around these cases.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where it gets a bit tricky. We got to admit, on some level, we're drawn to the drama, the intrigue, the shock value, like that car crash you can't look away from, even though you know you should.
I think we've all felt that. It's this weird mix of horror and being completely captivated, a really strange combination of emotions.
It is a strange mix, for sure. And I think it's important to be aware of that, to recognize that, yeah, we might be really interested in the complexities of the case, but we also need to be careful not to, exploit the tragedy just for entertainment. It's a fine line. And it's something that true crime media, they're always wrestling with that.
So true. It's about finding that balance, between our own curiosity and respecting the victims and their families. Because in the end, these aren't just stories. These are real people's lives full of all these complexities and nuances that can get lost when we retell them.
And those stories, they deserve to be told with sensitivity, with an understanding of the bigger picture, the social and psychological context.
Yeah.
The Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias case, like we've been saying, it's a perfect example of that. It makes us face these uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about our relationships, and about the potential for darkness that we all have inside.
As we wrap up this deep dive, that's what I really hope our listeners take away from all of this. It's not just about this one case, this one couple, this one awful ending. It's about looking inside ourselves, examining what we believe, how we act, and trying to create a world where love is a good thing, not something that hurts.
Perfectly said. And remember, if you or someone you know is struggling in a relationship that's toxic or abusive, there's help out there. Reach out, ask for help, and know that you're not alone.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Twisted Crime. And like always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.
And don't forget to follow CrimePod Castle on all your favorite podcast platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel for even more deep dives into the world of true crime. We'll catch you next time.